Welcome back to the Animal Free Labcast, everybody. I'm back with Dr. Gemma Davis. Gemma, what have we got coming up today?
Well, today we're going to be joined by Dr. Fiona Saunders from our Animal Replacement Centre of Excellence in Aberdeen.
Brilliant. Fiona is amazing. So really looking forward to talking with her. But before we do that, Gemma, I'm going to ask you to unpick the latest statistics from the government on the use of animals in experiments. Because those came out last week, and there's some quite shocking statistics, aren't there? Yeah. But before we do that, we must do last week's Mythbuster question. I'm not going to sing it.
Oh, I was waiting for it then.
No, I'm not going to do it. Right, so the question was, a change in Prime Minister could mean a change to the government strategy to phase out animal testing. Myth or fact?
Myth or fact? Yep, so 56% of people thought this was a fact and 44% said they thought it was a myth. So we've actually said this is a fact because, you know, it could mean a change, either in a good way or a bad way, I suppose. Although it could also mean that nothing changes. So we don't know, but we think there is a good chance, and it's a really good opportunity for something to change as well. So obviously, phasing out animal testing was a Labour Party manifesto commitment. So it's likely that this will continue to be an area of work for the government. But there is also a chance that it could become less of a priority. So we don't really know what Andy Burnham's stance is on anything to do with animals, really. He hasn't really said anything publicly about it yet. But we are going to be doing everything we can to bring this to his attention and to try and gain his support for Herbie's Law. So it's really exciting because having a new Prime Minister gives us lots of opportunities to carry on building momentum in Parliament. And this could be exactly what is needed to take Herbie's Law to the next step. So it's likely that Andy Burnham will bring in a new cabinet and a ministerial team, and that gives us lots of opportunities to keep making the case for Herbie's Law to a brand new group of decision makers and potentially secure some support at higher levels of government. So this is actually going to be a really busy time for us. So even though the government is going on recess over the summer, we're going to be carrying on trying to raise awareness and doing everything we can over recess. And then as soon as they come back, later in the year, we'll be straight back into it in the new term. We'll be attending the party conferences, trying to arrange meetings with everybody in their new roles. So this is a really exciting time, and there's lots of opportunities that could come.
Absolutely. And you're going to keep us updated on progress, and Isabel can come and talk to us about it. But, you know, Andy Burnham has said he wants bold action. So here's some bold action to take. Implement Herbie's Law. So the government released its statistics on the number of animals used in scientific procedures last week. So the headline stats, I'm going to give those, and then Gemma's going to kind of delve into it a little bit more for us. So over 2.54 million, so 2.5 million animal experiments took place in Britain last year, which is a dismal decrease of just 3.8% on 2024. So change is really not happening anywhere near fast enough. And shockingly, there was a rise in experiments on what they call specially protected animals. So they are dogs, cats, horses and monkeys. So all of those animals, and, you know, typically the ones that people care most about, were all used more in experiments last year than they were the year before. So Gemma, as our resident science policy expert, you've been looking at the stats in a lot more detail. So what have you found?
Yeah, well, like you say, it is very disappointing to see another year's figures with just a marginal reduction. And while, of course, it is good to see a reduction, we're really not moving anywhere near fast enough with this. So that reduction of 3.8% equates to just over 100,000 procedures, less than the previous year. So obviously that does sound a lot. But when you're talking about over 2.54 million procedures, you know, at that rate is going to take a really long time for us to get to zero. It's just not good enough. So, as you said, those 2.54 million procedures, almost half of those were for the creation and breeding of genetically modified animals. So many of those animals will have been killed without being used in experiments. You know, for example, if they just didn't have the right genetic mutations, but the rest would have been used in experiments. And the most common areas, like we've seen in previous years, in basic research, were things like the nervous system, the immune system, and cancer. So the number of procedures carried out over the year is higher than the number of animals used. So this is actually really concerning as well, because there was almost 80,000 more procedures than animals used. So that means that at least some animals underwent multiple procedures. And one really concerning point to pull out of this is that 19 cats were used in 91 procedures. So we don't know if that means that all 19 cats were used for multiple procedures or just some of those underwent lots and lots of procedures. It's not actually broken down in that way, so we don't know. But it means that those animals will have experienced more stress, undergone different experiments in what could have been very long-term experiments as well. And you mentioned there that there is an increase in the use of dogs, cats, horses and monkeys. There was a 7% overall increase in the number of experiments using those compared to 2024. And like I said, they're all specially protected species. So that means that under the law of ASPR, which is the Animals Scientific Procedures Act from 1986, these animals have a limited amount of extra protection compared to other animals. But all that really means is that their use must be more justified, including why these types of animals need to be used instead of what they consider less sentient animals. And then also the project license has to have a retrospective assessment, which is supposed to bring out any learnings from the projects so that in future these licenses might not have to use these types of animals. But it doesn't actually protect any of these animals from being used in experiments. So they can be, and they are. And in total, 3,670 of these specially protected species were used last year. So it is quite shocking.
It's a bit of a misnomer, isn't it? That especially protected, it's just basically meaningless.
Yeah, exactly. You know, they are still used in very high numbers.
Yeah.
So something else just to bring out that is quite shocking that a lot of people might not have thought about is that 97% of the monkeys that are used in experiments here in British labs were born in either Asia or Africa. So that means that they would have had to endure really long transportations, which are obviously very stressful for them, before they even reach the lab. And then, of course, they undergo the experiments, you know, many of which do go on for years. And especially with monkeys, they do include very invasive procedures, things like brain surgery and things like that. So it's a really difficult life for these poor animals. And that extra transportation isn't actually counted in the severity assessments of procedures. So it's, you know, it's a really concerning thing when you think about it, how difficult and stressful that would have been for the animal before they even get to the lab. But there is so much more, you know, I could talk about this all day. There's so many numbers and statistics and things that we're pulling out of these. So we will keep updating you, and obviously have a look at our website because we do have a lot of information on there that you can read about as well. But what has been really good is we've been working really closely with MPs to highlight the issues that we found in the statistics. And we've already supported loads of MPs to table written parliamentary questions. They only came out last Thursday, so it's been really great to see how quickly the MPs want to act on this. You know, they're literally tabling them as fast as we can write them. So it, you know, it's really great to see how keen they are to get these tabled before they go off for recess in the summer. And they really do want to get involved and get the answers to these questions. And another really fantastic thing that happened this week is that Lee Pitcher, the MP, asked an oral question about the statistics where he specifically mentioned Herbie's law. So have a quick listen to Lee's question.
The statistics published just last week show that 2.54 million scientific procedures involving animals were carried out in Great Britain in 2025. This represents a decrease of just 4% compared to those in 2024, but a 9% increase in experiments on dogs, and a 13% increase on those using monkeys. Does the Minister agree that greater urgency is needed to accelerate the phase-out of animal testing, and will she consider the merits of a clear long-term plan, such as that set out in Herbie's law?
Yes, I do agree that greater urgency is needed to accelerate the phase-out of animal testing, and I welcome, to that point, the government's strategy, which was published and backed by £75 million to do just that. DCIT has committed to publishing clear timelines for specific actions, and I very much look forward to seeing them.
So you can hear the response there from the Minister, Sarah Jones, the Minister for Policing and Crime, who is actually agreeing that greater urgency is needed to accelerate the phase-out of animal testing. So a positive response, still not what we want to hear, but it's fantastic it was raised.
It's a step in the right direction, isn't it? And it's that continual drumbeat of Herbie's law, Herbie's law, Herbie's law that they keep hearing, and you know, eventually that will result in change. So let's bring in Dr. Fiona Saunders from the University of Aberdeen and from the Aberdeen Arc. Welcome, Fiona. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So Fiona is one of the brilliant scientists who is at the cutting edge of pioneering animal-free, human-specific ways of doing medical research. And Fiona, you kind of specialise in working on breast cancer, that's right, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. That's what we're focused on in our lab.
So tell us a little bit about your work, like a general overview of the project, what you're hoping to achieve, why it's important.
So the focus of our work has been to develop a robust protocol for transitioning breast cancer cell lines that we use very commonly in research in the labs to animal-free serum replacements. So we are trying to substitute FBS, which is fetal bovine serum, which comes from beef industry and cows, and we want to try and move away from that and move it towards more sustainable animal-free options, but we were trying to develop it in a way so that we know that what works for particular cell lines and testing them to see whether they still respond in the same way, whether there's changes in their gene expression, that kind of thing. So we're trying to make it as robust as we can so that we can pass this on to people and say, this is a protocol that we've tested thoroughly. We know that this works in these cell lines, always with the caveat that you may need to do a little bit of your own testing to make sure that it works for what you're trying to do.
So as a layperson, I used to naively think that, I didn't even know that there was goo that or stuff that the cells had to live in, but I just naively thought that, the cells would live in the goo, and if the goo was made of animal derived components, that was a bad thing. Obviously it is, but then all you would simply do is just switch that out and put in the animal free goo, and that would be the end of it, and it would all work perfectly well. But I have come to realise through the brilliant work that you've been doing, Fiona, that it's really not that straightforward at all, is it?
It really isn't as straightforward as that. We've encountered several problems where you get the cells to a certain point in their transition where you're transitioning them from fetal bovine serum to the serum replacement, and the cells just die. Or they get to a point and they start to curl up and go, I really don't like this anymore. So we have found that we have to occasionally go backwards a little bit to try and encourage them to continue to grow, or we've just found that the cells just will not grow in these some of the substitutes that are available on the market. That's not to say that other cell lines wouldn't grow in those particular substitutes, but for what we're trying to do, they weren't as effective as we would hope they could be.
So and also, so it's not just a case of that if it works for one cell type, it's going to work for all other cell types. It's like you have to test like all the different, and how many cell types have we got in our bodies? Like 1 trillion?
Oh, there's so many different cell types. We're currently testing 4 different types of breast cells. So we've got a range of normal breast cells through to very aggressive triple negative breast cancer cells, and each of these cell lines are very different in the way that they respond to animal-free replacements. So some of the cell lines, the very aggressive cell lines, seem to be quite happy. Some of the more common estrogen positive breast cancer cell lines don't seem to be quite so happy. So it's maybe there's certain things that they are missing that in these substitutes that they're getting from the FBS, which helps them grow. And we have the normal breast cells as well. So they behave differently to the cancer cells because the mutations in the cancer cells means that they stop recognizing some of the signals.
One more question from me then, before I let Gemma ask some questions. I'll just be quiet for a minute. So this is one of the reasons why it takes a little while for a scientist to transition from using an animal or animal-based approaches to not using it. It's not simply a case of human cells just kind of like automatically work and they're happy in the lab and everything's fine. There's particular kind of tests that you need to do, different protocols that you need to develop, and they're time consuming, aren't they? Because you've been working on this for a little while now, Fiona, I think.
Yes, we've been working on this for just over a year now, and probably a bit longer than before that. But yeah, it's a process that takes some time, and it's not a case of just transitioning them and then starting experiments. We found that you need to leave them a bit longer once they've got to the transition, just to acclimatise, to get used to being in this slightly foreign environment. Other people just go straight from FBS and try and put their cells into animal-free replacements. We found that actually doesn't really work that well. Some cells may respond well to that, but other cells which are a bit more fragile, need a bit more help, they don't respond well to that. So it's something that trial and error, we've found this. And I think by being able to produce a robust protocol, we can actually help people slightly speed that process up.
Yeah, that's so important. And it's great that you're so persistent with it, because this is, really important to get right and get these cells growing in a human environment so that that what you're seeing is actually the result of human cells in a human environment. So it's really important work. So tell us a little bit more about fetal bovine serum, as you call it. We also call it fetal calf serum. So, it's exactly the same thing, isn't it? It's just slightly different name for the same thing, FCS or FBS. Tell us a little bit about fetal serum and what are the problems with it?
Fetal bovine serum it's basically a product from the beef industry. It's a byproduct, and it generally happens when the female cows go to slaughter and they're found to be pregnant. And the way that the serum is extracted from the calves is that there's a cardiac puncture. At this point, we're not sure how much pain, or if any pain, that these calves feel. There's some conflicting evidence about whether they can feel pain. Some say that they can. Some studies have shown that they have all of the anatomical parts and the physiological, but they don't have the connections, so that they may not be able to feel the pain. So the pain pathways may not be connected properly until they're born. So there's some kind of moral issues with it, because people think, you're killing a cow, you're killing an animal that's not even lived yet. And we're having to kill vast numbers of calves to be able to produce the volumes that are required for culture in the labs. And we're talking millions of animals per year to be able to do that.
Absolutely. When you think about the scale of it, it really is quite shocking. And obviously these are small animals as well. So the amount of serum that they would be able to get from one calf, isn't going to be, it's not going to go very far, is it? So the demand around the world, because this product is used so widely as well, isn't it? It's used in every single lab, basically, in the whole world. So the demand is unbelievable.
I think they're talking something like 800,000 litres per year. And that demand is still increasing. So there is a problem there. Yeah. When are we going to outstrip supply?
That's it. Exactly. And that's kind of just the ethical side of things. Tell us a bit about some of the scientific problems that can come from using it as well.
So fetal bovine serum, the cells grow in it beautifully, but we don't really understand what its complete composition is. We don't really understand what all of the individual ingredients are. So how much of what each thing is in there. So it can be a bit of a lottery. So you could get one batch of serum and your cells grow beautifully in it, and then for whatever reason that batch runs out. So you get a different batch from the same manufacturer and it's not quite the same, and the cells don't grow quite so well. So there is that element of reproducibility that is a problem, because you can't actually repeat the experiments because the cells are not growing in the same way. So that is a problem, and that's a problem. It's because it depends on where it's been sourced from. So a lot of the animals come either from South America or from Australia. There are geographical differences there, so you obviously have differences in what the animals are fed on as well. So that can also influence the composition of the serum. So again, there's a lot of unknowns to using fetal bovine serum, which makes it not an ideal, but because we've been using it for 100 plus years, we just accept that that's what is the standard.
Yeah, so it's just what we've always done. And I think as well, a lot of scientists probably don't really realise what it is and where it's come from, and A, the kind of moral and ethical issues involved, and B, the scientific issues involved.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people, particularly younger junior scientists, they just go with whatever they've been told by their supervisor or their principal investigator. So they just continue to follow on that pathway. So it's a kind of almost a self-propagating, where one generation just does what they've been told, and because it works, that's probably the reason most people use it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why the work that you're doing, and like you say, making your findings available to other researchers so they know that this can be done in another way, is so important.
So what made you want to get into this area of work, Fiona? How did you come to be interested in this?
So I kind of slightly fell into this. My principal investigator, my PI, Val Spears, this is one of her passion projects, that she's very much trying to find alternatives, and that's what she's been involved in. So when I joined her lab, there was bits and pieces of this had been started, and I kind of been taken over that and tried to develop it into a more full-blown project, so that we have a much better understanding and much better protocol for being able to transition the cells and make sure that they're still behaving in the way that we would expect them to behave, so that we can then say to other people, if you want to use this in an experiment, this is what we've done, this is what we've tested. So that's kind of how I got into this particular animal-free research area.
So why is animal-free research important to you personally, Fiona?
Particularly in the area that I work in, which is breast cancer, all the models, if they're in animals, they don't necessarily fully reflect what happens in a person. And I think we need more humanized models, so that what we're testing is genuinely what we're going to see in a patient. Because at the end of the day, all of these breakthroughs and all these things that we're trying to research, they're ultimately for the good of patients. So if we're developing a new drug treatment, yes, it's fantastic if it works in a mouse, but a mouse is not that, in certain ways, are not that similar to a human. They don't respond in the same way. You may not see the same responses in the immune system, for example. So it's important that we have more human-based models. There are certain things that we struggle to be able to model, like things like the immune system, although there are people are developing those sorts of models. If they can develop them in an animal-free way as well, that's so much the better for drug development, for development of things for patients as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning, you work at the Aberdeen ARC with Val. So what does it mean for you and the team to have become an ARC, an Animal Replacement Centre of Excellence? And what are your future goals?
So it's a really big honour and privilege to have been designated as an ARC, because it shows that we're trying to be sort of a centre of excellence in trying to develop animal-free research. It's also nice to be currently the only centre in Scotland, and geographically we're trying to show the spread of what's happening within. It's not all just concentrated into one central sort of area like in the southeast of England. We even get that in Scotland. Everything is concentrated into the central belt of Scotland, so it's nice to show that we've got innovation, we've got things happening in the northeast of Scotland, because we are a bit geographically isolated. So
I can confirm that, because we drove from Glasgow to Aberdeen when we were up there to give you the award, and I thought, we'll just pop up to Aberdeen. That's a long drive.
People totally underestimate how long it takes to get anywhere. So I know it takes 3 hours to get from Glasgow to Aberdeen, but yeah, if you've never done it.
So do I. So we were up there to award you and Val with the Aberdeen ARC, but also the day before you spoke at our first ever community event. So we've launched through the Centre for Human Specific Research, the Scottish community, to bring together people like you and people from Glasgow and Edinburgh and all over Scotland who are pioneering all of this fantastic work. And you were one of our main speakers, and you completely wowed everybody, Fiona. You really inspired all of the scientists in the room with the protocols that you're developing and the work that you presented. So how was that experience for you? Because for me watching, I was so incredibly proud that we were able to support that work and could see the reactions from people thinking, I should do this is really important.
It was a privilege to be asked, and it was really nice to be able to share the work that we've been doing that's been funded by the centre. It was really interesting to see how many people there actually are in the animal-free space in Scotland, because again, as I've said, geographically slightly isolated, you don't really know, but then having these community events, it's a really nice way of being able to see, there's somebody in Glasgow that we should speak to, or somebody in Edinburgh, for example. So it helps us develop some collaborations as well and broaden the reach of what we're trying to do.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Fiona. It's fantastic to hear about the work you're doing, and we're really, really proud of everything you're doing up there at the ARC. So carry on and be persistent with those cells. You'll get there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Well, that's all we've got time for in this episode. We'll be back in August with all the latest from the heart of animal-free research. But before we go, it's this week's Myth or Fact. Gemma, what is it this week?
Well, the question this week is myth or fact, dogs, cats, monkeys and horses are protected from use in experiments in Britain. So you can vote on our website. You can also find the link in the podcast email that will come out with this episode, and also in the links on our social media. And we'll discuss the results in the next episode. But if you've got any questions or would like to get in touch about anything else, please do drop us an email at hello@animalfreeresearchuk.org, and we might feature them in a future episode. So just to repeat the question, it was myth or fact, dogs, cats, monkeys and horses are protected from use in experiments in Britain.
I feel like the answer was maybe in the episode if you were listening.
Might be if you were listening closely, yeah.
What do you think? Well, that's all for this time. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back in August. Bye for now.